Hey everybody, welcome to AQ's Blog and Grill. Today our guest is Glen Drummond. Now Glen is what would you say? He is the Chief Innovation Officer at Quarry Integrated Communications, and he's here to talk about innovation, not just about technology, but about how we think. So I'm going to flip this back over to Glen because he's written a blog, and the blog is entitled Artificial Empathy. Now, come on, Glen. What the heck are you thinking about now? Come on.
Yeah.
Spit it out.
So we've had a big discussion about artificial intelligence, lots of investment, lots of hype. Notwithstanding the fact that there's a pretty legitimate philosophical argument whether artificial intelligence actually exists or not. Notwithstanding that, the whole science of predictive technology is transforming just about everything we do. The idea of raising the concept of artificial empathy is to point out a gap, to identify a problem that needs work. And the conjunction of artificial and empathy is a little bit shocking, a little bit disruptive. And it's intended to shake people out of a complacency that what we're doing with customer experience and corporate governance is somehow sufficient to overcome a fundamental problem in the way corporations and human beings are interacting with each other in today's economy. So that's the starting point.
Well, Glen, how important is empathy in a business sense or in a marketing sense? Isn't it about intelligence?
Mm-hmm. So here's the basic observation. Empathy is an essential and defining human quality. And some of the things that make that true are rooted in our physiology. We have mirror neurons so that, when I observe happiness or sadness on your facial features, I have neurons in my brain that will make me feel physically the emotions that you're experiencing. We have an endocrine system that both produces oxytocin and reacts so that those that we are closer with because of that hormonal response. So empathy is actually flowing in our bloodstream. In primate behavior, we're just one of several primates. Endorphins are released through, grooming behaviors so that we can actually influence each other's hormones through our interactions. This is very essential to the nature of human beings, and it's also programmed into then our expectations. So we expect other human beings to be empathetic. Now, what's really interesting is when we do a certain amount of neuroimaging on the way people react to corporate logos, they look at corporate logos as if they're other faces. They actually light up the same areas of the brain that light up when we're looking at faces. And we have an expectation. We think of corporations as if they were people. There's lots of evidence for this in advertising practices, the use of personas to develop brand strategy. And there's evidence even in our legislative record in the United States. Corporations are granted a human right of freedom of speech with the Citizens United ruling. So there's all sorts of evidence that we anthropomorphize corporations no less than we anthropomorphize dogs and cats and Disney characters and so on. And so here we get to the nub of the issue. We are empathetic. We expect other people to be empathetic. We perceive corporations as if they were other people. And we expect corporations then to be empathetic. But the problem is corporations lack mirror neurons. They lack an endocrine system. They lack all that biological inheritance that we have for empathy. And so there's a disconnect between our natural intuitive expectations of the way corporations should behave and the capacities that corporations have today to act and interact in the world.
So in part of your blog, it seemed to me you were expecting bots or anything else powered by AI to become more empathetic, to become less about the rational thinking, but include some of the emotional aspects. So maybe the neuron mirroring is going to happen with your interactions between you and the bot. So is this really going to happen, Glenn?
It's a very good reader that can go well beyond what's written on the page and develop a path like that. Yeah, I think that that's one possible way that artificial intelligence could go, but I don't think it's the way that the predictive technologies are being directed today. And I believe corporations are at a very important vectoring point in terms of the way artificial intelligence will be deployed. Will it be deployed in a strategy of maximizing advantage for the corporation, or will it be deployed in ways that are oriented towards sensing, what is appropriate and desired, will we use artificial intelligence and all the the predictive sciences in a way that make corporations more empathetic or less empathetic? I think it's an open question, and I think it's a question that deserves to be asked right now.
Is this part of the concern that someone like Bill Gates and Elon Musk have expressed, that they're very cautious about how artificial intelligence could evolve, which could be friendly, but they've shown some fear that it may go the other way and just become a manipulative power that either will be used by corporations or governments, or dare I say, the combination of the corporate state. So is this something you're picking up on?
Once again, you're jumping ahead on the path from what I've outlined in the blog in a way that I think is intelligent and bridges to some very important conversations today. But I want to go back actually more deeply into the way organizations are organized and managed and run. And I'd like to suggest that, yes, the concerns you raise are absolutely vital concerns, but the pathway to solving those problems is not likely to be arrived at by simply writing policy about this is what our AIs should do and shouldn't do, or by being careful about bias in our algorithms and so on. I think what really we need to do is to go back and look at this in terms of the ideological architecture of the firm, the kinds of things that Peter Drucker was talking about in the theory of the business. So, for instance, how do we conceive segmentation, and what's its purpose? Is segmentation's purpose to allow us to, target the audiences that will buy our products and package up the representation of the features and benefits of our products in such a way that the customers will buy, and the economics of the production, sales, and marketing apparatus will be optimized? Or is the purpose of segmentation to find different groups of people with different wants and needs that we can satisfy by leveraging our knowledge and capacities to satisfy that customer with what we have today, to design what that customer will want tomorrow, and to really build value in that relationship in a way that is, frankly, empathetic. Now, the idea of segmentation has been around for a long time. But between those two uses of segmentation, which one is the predominant view in the way it's understood, the way it's practiced, the techniques, the approach that wins the day and wins the argument? I would say that it doesn't take very much in the way of a survey of segmentation practices to see that we are a long way from mere neurons in the way corporations are discerning the emotions and the needs and the interests of their counterparts in the public. And and the result of this is that we get, a series of situations where people feel it's their job to do things that, later the shareholders regret and the public comes to hate.
So in the blog, you bring up the point, and it's well done, about governance. So governance, as it relates to kind of the shareholder body and the corporate model, is something that usually ends up as a piece of legislation, and it sits there. Now, is that going to be good enough, do you think, 10 years from now, 5 years from now? How are we going to start instituting the way to think about this, as well as how to legislate it?
Right. So, I think governance does play into this. And there's no question that, the tone that's set by leaders at the top of organizations can make a big difference in culture, and that is going to affect behaviors in the organization. And so I don't think corporations are going to advance on empathy without attention to the topic at the level of governance. And, I think we can find some examples of some superlative people, in governance roles that are paying attention to these things. But that's not actually enough. It's evidently not enough. I'm sure, there were some very thoughtful people at Volkswagen involved in the governance at Volkswagen, and yet at the same time, the emissions masking scandal is really a very important issue. It imposed externalities on the public that were essentially criminal. So good intentions, aren't quite enough.
Somewhere in a very warm climate, there's a road paved by those intentions. I may
Exactly.
be wrong about that, but I think I'm pretty up to date.
Yeah.
Okay. So how is this? I mean, you and I we've worked together for over 30 years, and we've helped build organizations, we've helped build brands, we've helped build relationships between organizations and consumers, brands and consumers, publics and organizations. So artificial empathy, are we going to be able to use this now as a tool to help do those things that I just mentioned? Is this going to be applicable?
Yeah. So what I'd like to propose is that artificial empathy is a provocation. Uh, in the innovation literature, they say that you get 1 point for solving a problem, you get 2 points for discovering a problem. And I would like to propose that claiming the phrase artificial empathy is the discovery of a problem, that organizations do not have a natural capacity for empathy, but empathy is a natural expectation of customers and the broader public, that corporations must act this way. And the stakes are becoming more fraught. The IPCC says we have 12 years to shift our economy from a carbon-based economy to a post-carbon-based economy, or we have to embrace the prospect of an ecological catastrophe that is worldwide. Now, any corporation that is setting policy and setting direction that is ignoring that statement, sure, it's fair for corporations to say, well, let's do our own independent research and pressure test and validate that assertion, both about the time and the scope. But really, there is an enormous amount of scientific weight behind that observation. And so if organizations are going to take time and think about that sort of thing, they better, make sure there's a brisk timeline before they say, okay, so what are we going to do about this? That's one example. But I think there are also many mundane examples, little micro assaults on the customer that don't need to be there and wouldn't be there if the corporation was truly sensing and responding to the feedback in real time in the way that our human imaginations and the way our biological mechanisms for empathy provide for. So, for instance, you're on a telephone line with your telecom character, and the phone continues to repeat a message every X number of minutes or seconds to say, please continue to hold. Your call is very important to us. Who hasn't had that experience? It's a terrible experience, right? No empathetic organization would ever do that to people. You're sitting in a departure lounge, and in addition to all the myriad assaults that take place as you travel through commercial air travel, in your departure lounge, there is a barrage of pre-recorded messages assaulting you from the loudspeaker system. And while you might be attending to the question of, whether your plane is, departing, whether you should be queuing up to get on it, you're listening to, stuff that isn't necessary, could have been handled with a visual display, and is intruding on your world. Again, no empathetic organization would ever do that, and yet somebody thought it was their job to do that to people. The list goes on, and it's time to call for a more fundamental feedback loop. And I want to take a particular swing here at the customer experience movement, because one of the possible readings of the article is to say, well, clearly you're talking here, Glenn, about customer experience, these things that I've just mentioned. Well, yes, that's true. But if customer experience is a department, if it's a metric that has to do with whether people will recommend you or not, and measuring performance on that metric, keeping a score, these things aren't empathetic. And even if there are brief fluorescences of improvements in customer experience, but we haven't got to the fundamental structural problem of building empathy almost from a biomimicry standpoint into the corporation, then I don't think we're going to fundamentally solve the problem. And as the blog says, sociopaths are actually notable for their ability to be charming now and then.
Your next blog could be about fake authenticity.
Joe Pine beat me.
Well, that's great. Now, Glenn, where are our followers, our group here at AQ's Blog and Grill, where are they going to be able to find this blog?
Right. So in my capacity as Chief Innovation Officer at Quarry, Quarry's invested in another organization called Carbon Design, which is bringing a different business model to the delivery of marketing strategy and innovation pathfinding. So this article is going to appear on the Carbon Design blog site.
It's a brilliant set of brilliant ideas, Glenn, which never surprises me from you, which is a good thing. And we'd like to thank you for appearing today, and because this is the internet, forever on AQ's Blog and Grill. So thank you very much.
You're a very generous interviewer, Alan. Thank you.
Thanks, Glenn. Wasn't that great? I thought it was. And I'm being truthful about that. There's no fake. There's nothing except truth right there. So we'd like to thank Glen Drummond. Tune in to AQ's Blog and Grill as often as you can. Be one of our subscribers, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you.